Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Good evening. Welcome to the Sioux Falls City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 8th. We'll go ahead and get started with this week's meeting. Clerk, can you please read the roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Staley.
Here.
Brecky. Erickson.
Here.
Kiley.
Here.
Neitzert.
Here.
Selberg.
Here.
Sale.
Here.
Starr.
Here. Thank you. We have the honor of having Josh Brewer, who is the CEO with Lifelight, with us this evening. Josh is going to be leading our invocation, and I'd ask that you rise for that and stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to follow.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this work that you've called us to, Lord. We thank you that you've given us the ability and that you give us that you provide for us to be able to do the work that you called us to, Lord. We thank you so much for our mayor. Lord, we thank you for the city council, who you've given the authority to shape and mold our great community, Lord. We also thank you for the servants in our community, the firefighters, the police department, Lord, the many others who make our community a great place to be, a great place to live, Lord. And I just pray over this meeting today. I pray over this meeting for your presence to be here, Lord, for your peace to be felt. Lord, that we can remember that we are followers and children of you, and then we're Americans, Lord, and then we are citizens of this great city. And Lord, we pray for that order. We pray for that, those priorities to be in place in our own lives, Lord. And we thank you so much for the many people here tonight, Lord, and I thank you for all that you've done for us and the many blessings that you give us, Lord. And we praise you in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Appreciate it.
All right, we'll move on to the approval of our consent agenda. Are there any motions or items to be pulled on that agenda this evening? Councilor Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to pull items 3 and items 4.
All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Starr.
And then I'd like to pull item number 3 on the contracts memo, contracts and agreements. It's number 3.
Okay. So sub-item 3 from that, and item 3 and 4 from item 7. Was that Councilor Erickson? Pull items 3 and 4.
On the change orders, I want to pull items 3 and 4.
Got it. Okay. Any other changes or items to pull? If not, look for a motion.
Move to approve the remaining items.
Second, Star.
Okay, motion by Kiley, seconded by Starr. Any further discussion? A vote on that, please.
Councilmember Staley.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Kiley.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
All right, that's passed 8-0. We'll now move on to our regular agenda and look for a motion on that.
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Neitzert.
Okay, a move to approve by Erickson, seconded by Neitzert. Any discussion, council? If not, a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Staley.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Kiley.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
All right, that's passed 8-0 as well. We're at public input for tonight's agenda. As a reminder, input during this portion will last no more than 3 minutes per person, and in total last no more than 30 minutes. During this portion of the meeting, persons may not address any item appearing on the regular agenda. For those items after general public input, input is limited to 3 minutes unless the item is being presented for final adoption, in which case public input is limited to 5 minutes. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the public forward. And please note, clerk, the time is 7:05. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Catherine Riffle. I've been here many times. I've got a lot on my mind, so I made notes tonight so I can make sure I cover everything. I guess you're not going to like what I have to say because you haven't liked it yet. That's not my situation to deal with, it's yours. You're here to take care of your people in the city, not just to give awards to friends and churches. People putting in flowers and decorating yards and all should be doing this on their own, not because they're going to get an award. You're here as a city council to be responsible to the persons and citizens' safety, health, and living conditions. It is not the responsibility of the churches. They help by choice. Your political arena is different from choice. It's by need, direction, responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. You're supposed to set good examples, even in something that you feel is unpleasant. There are more people on the streets than in the Dudley House and the Mission. If you don't believe me, look at the list of the numerous names of rejected persons, either for a time being or for the even not ever allowed back in. The lists are so long that they outweigh the people in these buildings. The city is responsible to the people first. That includes the homeless, displaced persons, indigenous persons who are even refugees on their own land. Dogs and other animals are given more aid than our street dwellers. We, the people, have the right to free speech. We have the right to be compassionate towards others. If you claim so much to be fixed to churches, then do your job right. Provide shelter for those in need, and let the churches help out when they want or if they're able. Quit being ignorant to the less fortunate people. I speak from experience. I speak with compassion. And I speak of grief of what's happened and still happening to others in our city. I am a survivor. I am also a surrenderer of myself to the Holy Spirit. My faith is much stronger than many. I believe the holiest of holies, the Almighty Spirit, will direct you to make the right and good choice to also serve others in need, not just with big businesses. And while you're wasting multi-million dollars of money, and then expecting us in the city to be paying for it and to cover up for your careless decisions. You mentioned in your paper here about the agenda. I don't quite understand what you talk about, city surplus, but I would say if you've got a building that's a city surplus, you should do something with it and make it accessible to other people. The Huey apartment, I understand, the man backed out or the company backed out. So if it's still livable, why don't you fix it up and get the people off the street, and when the weather breaks, then do what you want to do with it. Besides, you're moving everybody out on the West End anyway. Get real. No one should freeze to death. Well, anyway, no one should freeze to death on our streets. I will hold you all accountable. I am tired of you neglecting them.
Thank you.
And you, the new mayor, should be doing something about this. You've known about it.
Thank you, Catherine, for your input tonight.
Okay, well, I'm tired
Catherine,
of keep
thank you
coming
for your
here.
input. Next person, please.
I
Please
know,
come forward.
but I am tired of constantly coming here when you're doing nothing.
Please come forward, ma'am. Thank you.
Want to arrest me? Arrest me. I don't care. But you better do something for the people that need your help. And that's not compassion, that's reality. God bless you and help you make the right decisions for your bad mistakes.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Darlis Halverson, and I'm here to talk about the streets. You have been mayor since May. You were here in April when we had the April 15th blizzard. So you had a look to see how the street department took care of the streets. Ice melt got put down before the storm came. Snow was promptly removed, curb to curb removal, and sand was deposited at busy intersections. Your first blizzard was in December. There was no ice melt put down, even though the weatherman had constantly warned us that there was going to be an ice storm. There was not prompt removal of the snow. There was no sand put on the intersections. I have slid through so many intersections. I take care of little old people. I travel about 1,000 miles a month going from their homes. Your first blizzard didn't have the right response. The streets are still not cleaned curb to curb. The gutters are plugged, the water piles up. then it freezes, and you have huge ice puddles to drive on. Lawila Hunking taught us well on how to clean the streets. And if you don't remember Lawila, look her up, because she was a fantastic lady. The second blizzard, I expect better, I demand better street cleaning. I want ice melt put down before the storm comes. I want prompt curb-to-curb removal of the snow, and I want sand at busy intersections. I don't want to have to pray when I slide through the intersections at 57th in Minnesota, or 10th and Cliff, or 26th in Minnesota, or 12th Street when I drove coming off the interstate. That was an extreme nightmare. I have a Prius. I should not be plowing streets. That's your job, Mayor.
Thank you. Good evening.
My name is Jim, and
Your last name, Jim?
yes, I'm here to talk about Wi-Fi radiation tonight. I was
What was your last name, Jim, for the record?
What's that?
Your last name?
Oh, Holloway.
Okay.
And just for a change of pace, if you have your cell phone with you, if you'd like to go along with me on mine, if you
Jim,
go
this
in
is actually on the agenda, so you'll be able to speak on this topic when we get to this item on the agenda.
Yeah, you know,
that's
I
how
didn't
we
even
take-
know I had come to do this. And then I looked at the meeting and I saw that, what is there, 5G later on?
It's on the agenda, correct?
So can I talk about just Wi-Fi now?
Sure, you bet.
Okay, I'm just talking about Wi-Fi, but also cellular phone has the same kind of, you know, it's got antenna for Wi-Fi as well. But if you go into your settings, and if you have a iPhone, I don't, you gotta go into general and then about and then legal. But if you have a different kind of phone, if you just go into legal and read what it says in there about how close you're supposed to have a phone to you, my phone says 5 millimeters, no closer than 5 millimeters. And a lot of them say 10 to 15. It's about a ½ inch. You're not supposed to put the phone up against your ear. And in fact, most of them recommend that you do not even hold the phone. You use air tube headset or use the speaker option. That's the recommendation that comes right from the manufacturers of the phone, and they're doing that to comply with the FCC standards. I'm concerned about this because I ran across an article a few weeks ago about the Wi-Fi in schools, but it also pertains to everywhere, all government buildings, and there's so much of it around, and it's increased a quintillion, I guess that's to 1 with 18 zeros after it. In the last 10 years, the exposure to Wi-Fi radiation has expanded that much. I just wanted to bring up that there was a toxicology report that came out November 1st of this year from the U.S. National Toxicology Program. It was a $30 million study, and it was over like 16 years, I think. And they determined that radio frequency radiation that carries our wireless signals causes DNA damage, brain and heart tumors. And then the Ramazzini Institute in Italy found the same thing in August of 2018. Now, it's understandable that we might not hear a lot of this because of the Wi-Fi industries not wanting some of this information to get out, or it's just not being broadcast. But the toxicology report is here, and it says that you can get that online. That's from the National Toxicology Program. This is from the program in Italy. And then there's an article put out by Harvard back in about 3 years ago. It said captured agency, and it's talking about the FCC. And that at that time, the head of the FCC was a careerist in the telecom industry. And currently, the FCC commissioner is a careerist from the telecom industry. I believe it's telecom. And Mr. Pai, who's the chairman, is with that industry or the Wi-Fi as well.
Thank you,
hand it with
Jim.
that.
Anyone else for public input this evening?
My name is Dwayne Skipper. Water and electricity are necessary for a basic standard of living. Even the destitute people of war-torn Syria and Iraq, when asked what they need most, the answer is water and power. In the most civilized country of the world, we too are dependent on water and electricity to live. These monopoly public utilities in South Dakota are 100% controlled by state and city governments. They determine what you will pay. Your standard of living goes down for every unnecessary dollar paid for these public utilities. In Sioux Falls, if I asked 1,000 random residents, would any of them know that electricity prices have increased 60 to 70% and water and sewer rates have tripled? The special interest groups and government entities affecting your electric bill are far-reaching and more complicated. However, with current lower hydro, natural gas, and coal prices, we could be paying and should be paying year 2000 electric rates today. I have calculated water and electric rate increases using my own paper utility bills going back to 1995. City water treatment rates are determined at the discretion of the mayor and his administration. Water rates were increased dramatically in 2006. In fact, by 2010, 4 years later, water rates had increased 83% and sewer rates 89%. The rate increases continue, and now in 2019 are 200% higher, tripling water bills. So what happened to water rates prior to 2006? Going back to 1995, rates were basically unchanged. City population grew about 45,000 from 1985 to 2005. How did the city pay for water and sewer pipes to accommodate that growth? Public Works has said policy has been to charge users for all expenses, no tax dollars used. I can safely say that water rates did not triple during that 20-year period. Those old water rates and increased gallons sold were adequate to pay for that population growth. City residents must ask what happened to the tripled water revenue collected since 2006. And now we're looking at $260 million more.
Thank you, Dwayne. Good evening.
Hello again, Stephen Ciano. I want to first mention about your prayer at the beginning. I was attacked for having different beliefs. I mentioned last time that one of the things that I saw wrong with the church is I was told to be good and then to tell somebody when I was bad. And I said, well, I'll just be good. Well, then also I saw the ritual that went on inside the church, and I went out and I didn't see God in church. I saw God outside in the interconnectedness of everything that was around me, nature, people, animals and plants. It's all there if we look at it, and it's within ourselves. And I also saw something beyond the physical, and that is what is to be adhered to. This is my belief, and I have firm beliefs, and it's not that I don't believe. And I've been attacked for my beliefs ever since I joined the Navy, and I cited my beliefs and was therefore declared homosexual and attacked, and with my life threatened, I suffered a breakdown and been disabled, and people in positions to be able to help me have refused to help me and have instead supported an ongoing assault on me for my beliefs. And I believe that this body is involved in that, as I've mentioned before. But I explain my beliefs now a little bit more. And this extends to my lack of medical care where I need it. Certainly Falls Community Health could have revealed the fact that the VA hospital is discriminating against me and could have done something about it, and city attorneys could have done something to press the issue and defend me as being discriminated against, but they have not. And I feel that people need to be held accountable, and of course I do. People have done me and my family a serious wrong. I have lost children, I have lost their mother, and I've nearly lost myself once again, but I have used supplements in place of official medications to deal with apparently blocked arteries. And it is apparently working, and possibly quite a bit better than what might have been prescribed by professionals. So we need to open our minds and serve everyone appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sierra Broussard, Sioux Falls. When I say we need to hold landlords accountable and Cutler Law Firm here, these are his tenants. So this is one. Now this is an attorney now, mind you, that is still having his tenants in there doing illegal massaging. So one of them pled guilty to this, count one. Another one, count one. Another one, count one. And then we have another one that's going to court for her second offense. And then they're asking for jail time. Mr. Cutler, law firm, Kent Cutler, and Norm Drake, that owned the properties, is still putting these tenants in here collecting illegal. Now, she's gonna go up for her third one after this sentence is over. I'm gonna put a video out there on her third count. There's no laws holding these landlords accountable, knowing that these people are doing it on rental properties, and the landlords are not evicting these people. Norm Drake and Kent Cutler, who would have known? So when these are finished, we're gonna have a second one coming out. The third, Zan Yang is number 5 on this issue here. So I advise anybody with the city, I know people listening here at home, to not do no business with Kent Cutler Law Firm. If he's gonna sit here and pay criminals in his rental property collecting $1,900 a month, and Norm Drake too, what is he doing corrupted in the court system? We cannot hold him accountable on state level. I've looked at it for Mr. Kent Cutler. Kent Cutler and Norm Drake continue to keep doing it. Keep calling the police. We keep calling it. Let the crimes go up on our properties. Let's not cooperate with law enforcement. Let's not cooperate with Mercados and all that strip mall there that Norm Drake owns. That's what the police is there for. That's not the right answer that Norm Drake has for me. I've got some letters from Norm Drake too that I'll be providing to shut my mouth on these issues. And I'm going to keep putting it forth, and hopefully he sells his properties and people will stop having ties with Mr. Norm Drake on these rental properties here, because it's a disgrace. And I'm still having more people arrested coming up in a couple months on this issue.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bruce Danielson, Sioux Falls. I spoke at the informational public input, and I want to express the gratitude of this administration for at least bringing a couple of items to the consent agenda, because I really think that they need to be hardly discussed, and we need to take a closer look at the construction manager at risk. as I pointed out earlier, I had about 6,500 of my friends sign these petitions 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, concerning the building that is now, we call it the Romantics Annex, the city center, because that building was rushed into construction. It was a building that should not have been built at the time because it was decided that it was needed for a party. And we don't know the full reason why we needed that building. I don't know if we'll ever know the full reason why we needed that building. But just like the event center, the swimming pool, I've seen issues with the parking ramp. You know, we have a lot of money that was spent on a building down here, and now we're going to have to spend some more. And I think it's a real shame in our system. I also wanted to just bring something up. I was able to go out and look at Candy Hansen's presentation, the amount of it that I was able to with the work I was running around doing today. And one of the problems that we're having in Sioux Falls is we're losing a middle class. This is amazing bit of information here showing that in the area that is most critical to the growth of any community, any civilization, is the middle class. And this actually laid out that we're losing our middle class. And I'm not seeing any of the jobs coming back into this town that replace the Capital Ones, the Citibanks, all of the good paying jobs that this town had. And this shows it in a quick synopsis, just since 2008, I believe. Then I had another piece here that shows another sign of how bad it is. We have 82% of the Title VIII schools that are on free and reduced. I sat through Pam Holman's discussions about having to subsidize meals in the school system because their parents can't afford to feed them. And they can't afford things, the backpack programs, all of these things, all tie back into that first chart that was out here, that we don't have a middle class anymore, and we aren't doing anything to bring middle class jobs to this town. Having 25 forklift jobs in a $30 or $40 million development is not a good deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else this evening for public input? Clerk, next item, please.
This would be sub-item 3 to be pulled from item 6, Parks and Recreation, 14001, Falls Park Development Sidewalk and Railing Improvements to award a bid, Dakota Land Sod Farm, Inc., $227,000, contract number 19-1013.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's as much a question about the item as it is the overall process of what we're trying to accomplish. We commissioned a safety study and review of Falls Park, and I wanted to make sure before we do any work, I mean, that was a big part of our debate on the issue at the time, was that we should have a safety expert review what we're doing before we spend money on what we think solve the safety issues. And this item is the going ahead and doing it before we talk about the actual safety issues and what the consultant found for us. So I was hoping there was going to be some kind of presentation or something that would, a public discussion of what the consultant found and how it fits in with what we're doing for sidewalk and railing repairs, and if this actually takes care of the issues the consultant found.
Would you like to detail on this, Don, or you want to talk about this, to provide detail on what this item entails?
Sure, I can give you a little background on the process that the consultant from Alliant who did the study that the City Council asked for. One of the things, the first thing that they did is that they were provided all the safety reviews and studies that were done leading up to his trip to Sioux Falls. So he was aware of the incident dating back to 2013, aware of the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance safety audit that they were performing as an exercise for their staff members. They were also aware of James Moore and his recommendations that came before the City Council as well. which included as part of that recommendation to install the viewing platforms and the railings on the west side of the river just north of the pedestrian bridge. And so the consultant that came in and looked at trying to mitigate any further drowning effects in Falls Park took all those reports into consideration as they formulated the recommendations, and the recommendations that I think you all have been copied on and provided a copy of included some additional recommendations above and beyond what he knew that we were already working towards. City Council back in July of this year recommend and funded improvements for the railing improvements and the viewing platforms. And so essentially what his report included was taking the recommendations that had already been put in place over the last 5 or 6 years, and then also knowing that we were moving forward with the viewing platforms, he did suggest 3 other items that we are planning to implement as well.
Thanks, Don. Councilor Sale, you have a question?
Don, since this second report became public, what kind of input did you get from the citizens of Sioux Falls since we've made the report public? Did you get any kind of input based on that?
I personally have not had any feedback on that.
Thank you.
Councilor Kiley?
Thank you. And to bring us back to the topic that's before us here this evening, on July 17th, this City Council approved resolution number 62-18 to amend the 2018-22 capital plan program to build this viewing platform. And at that time, we appropriated $300,000. So we did have the discussion on this particular item back in July. And I fully support what we're doing tonight is just simply awarding a bid and contract to do what we've already decided and discussed should be done. So I'm going to support approving this particular item this evening. While having said that, I would not object to if at a later point, appropriate point, follow up on how these items in the Alliant review are being addressed. I think that would be helpful too.
Councilor Staley.
And to follow up on Councilor Sale's question to you about how much you've heard from the public, we haven't had a public informational on this, right? A presentation. So a lot of people probably aren't digging into the backdoor proceedings that happen within our city government. So again, I had concerns before we appropriated this money that I thought we should have done the safety study before we started in on the viewing platform. So I agree with Councilor Kiley that we need to have a public discussion, presentation about that.
Thank you. Councilor Neitzer.
Just to be clear, those 3 items that were talked about in the report that had to do with the stairs and I think bringing a couple of fences closer together, is that in the scope of work of what we're approving here, or is that going to be done separately? What would that look like?
That would be done separately. We will plan to do that this year. We actually have a parking lot project that would address some of the fencing off the northwest corner of the Overlook Cafe. And so we have a drainage project that we're already planning to do, and so we'll just incorporate the additional fencing into that. And then through our operations budget, we'll handle the other 2 items that were recommended out of the Alliant report.
And can they all be done, I'm assuming, separately, where doing this is not going to be something where it's going to conflict? You don't have 2 different projects which are doing the same thing or doing something that's completely opposite. They're in isolation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
The other locations are separate from this project that you're considering tonight.
Okay, and one final point. I guess we did have the discussion. That was when we appropriated. We're just awarding a contract tonight of what we already appropriated. So
correct.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Starr.
I would move to defer this item till February 5th so that we can discuss the Alliant report.
Second, Staley.
Okay, we're motion to defer this item till, what was the date?
I believe it's February 5th is our first February meeting.
It's actually February 4th.
Or February 4th? You're right, I forgot about the...
February 4th meeting, and that's seconded by Councilor Staley. You can
Could,
explain
Mr.
that,
Mayor?
sure.
I totally agree that we debated this quite fully back in July, and it was something that we wanted to get this viewing platform and sidewalk things and needed to get it done as quickly as possible, and that we didn't have time to get a safety report done before we wanted to get this in place so it's ready for the spring and the tourist season. What's changed is that we've had the opportunity to get this report, to have the consultant come in, and to have a public discussion about the report itself and what we're trying to do. So yes, at that time in July, it would have made sense to keep moving. We're just seeing this now for the first time to approve this contract as it's worked through. It didn't get rushed as fast as we wanted. We got the safety report done before we have to approve this and moving it back a couple of weeks so that we can actually discuss the report and make sure that what we're doing moving forward makes sense. Gives us the opportunity to wait till the 4th of February to do that.
I'd like to give Don the floor on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring to the council's attention that deferring this item would extend it beyond the 30-day award timeframe for us to be able to get this award within that 30-day window that we have. So just be aware of that.
Councilor Brecky.
Just raised an additional question. When did the alliance? When was the alliance study done? I mean, when was it completed?
December 10th. December 10th.
It was received by the city attorney's office on December 11th.
Councilor Erickson.
Question for Don. My question is in regards to the Alliant report. And did Alliant know that this platform was appropriated and that we were planning on doing that and that it passed? And it's my understanding that's why it's not in the report, is because they knew we were going to do it, and so they didn't address it, and they addressed all the other things because we as a council voted, appropriated, decided to do it, and now we're essentially awarding the contract.
Yeah, we made them aware of it. We provided them the design of the project, and they were aware that we were actually on the verge of bidding this project as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
And just a clarification, what are they going to be immediately doing? Are they going to be starting to build these things, the sidewalk and the railings, in the middle of the winter?
They will initially set up their staging as of the 1st of February, and then mobilization, and then as soon as the weather breaks, March, April, they'll start construction.
How many bids did you get for this?
I don't recall exactly how many bids we had.
Do you have to take the lowest bid, or do you take whatever?
We did take the low bid, and it's about $22,000 under the engineer's estimate.
Okay. Councilor Brecky.
Either for the city attorney or for Don, are we going to be briefed on this report? I mean, is there a plan to brief us on this report?
Well, the report was released to all of you already, and if there were any questions, of course, we fielded those, but there's nothing to be presented for the council as far as a vote, so there hasn't been an informational meeting scheduled because you already have the information.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kiley.
Very similar to what Councilor Erickson had stated. I had reached out to Director Kearney about this, and I was informed the same thing that Councilor Erickson had stated previously, that the individual that did the safety review was aware of the construction of the lower viewing platform, so did not take that into consideration when he compiled this report that we received on December 12th, almost a month ago. So this report has absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing right now, other than awarding the contract to what we discussed at length back in July.
One final point.
Councilor Erickson.
One final point before we vote. It's my understanding that unless the contractor agrees to an extension past that 30 days, that then we have to reject the bid and start all over. Is that correct in the process?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I won't be supporting a deferral at this time, and then ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion to defer this item to February 4th.
Just a point of order, we kind of switched back and forth. I wasn't sure when we were in, if we were in discussion, because then we got back into Q&A. And so, I'd like to, discuss it a little bit.
The floor is yours, sure.
Yeah. It feels like we're getting the cart before the horse. I mean, how are you supposed to figure out kind of the master plan out there when you haven't sat down and discussed the report and figured out what the top priorities are? I mean, this was already in there, and I get that, but I don't see any harm in waiting for a short while. Again, especially if the bidder can still agree to hold on to the bid, which I think there's probably no problem in them doing, because February 4th isn't very long, to allow us, again, to look at the big picture out there and what we're doing and how this fits in with that. It's just weird to me that we've got this report. Yeah, we received it. Okay, it's like, so when are we going to talk about it? And all of a sudden we're talking about it tonight, at the time that that this is already being done. I realize it was part of the CIP, but also in that whole time was that indecision that we were having about the need to get a report. And now we're going to just push forward without actually even looking at the report. So, I mean, I realize the Alliant person might have had some recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's our job to decide what our top priorities are out there. And I think we need to have that information that's in that report in order to do that, and discuss it as a council. So I just like more time to discuss it, as a council, discuss what the contents of the report, whether it be in legal briefing, because of the confidential nature of it, the liability exposure, or some other similar setting.
Councilor Sale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I can understand some confusion with the two topics. The topic we're discussing here is what we've already talked about last summer. We determined that this was appropriate based on the recommendations by our own city staff. We already determined that. After that is when Councilor Kiley brought forth the motion to do a study, and we asked for what additional things would an outside person say needed to be done. And that is the report that was received on December 11th that we have not had an informational on, and I would hope someday that we would very shortly. But I think that what we're going to vote on tonight is the base that we have to do, the minimum that we've already discussed and the city risk experts have brought forward to us. So I would suggest that I understand the confusion, and I'm a little confused at times too, but at this particular juncture, we're going to vote on bidding what we've already determined to be the base level. And then let's request an informational on the second level and go forward from there. So my position is to vote against the deferral and vote for the contract so we can move forward. And then I'm going to formally request informational on the second part.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other discussion on this?
I guess I would just say, I understand that, I appreciate that, but for me, priorities shift based on information. I always feel uncomfortable making decisions, important decisions, when I don't have all the information that's available to me before me. So I will be voting for the deferral, but I do really appreciate your clarification. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion to defer this then.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
No.
Kiley?
No.
Neitzer?
No.
Selberg?
No.
Sale?
No.
Starr?
Yes.
All right, that fails 5-3, so we
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
so we have a motion now to approve this item by Erickson, seconded by Kiley. A discussion on that. All right, a vote on this then, please.
Councilmember Staley?
No.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
No.
All right, that passes 6-2. Next item, please.
Sub-item 3 to be pulled from item 7, Facilities 06002, City Administration Building, Mechanical Revisions, Air-Cooled Chiller System, Henry Carlson Company, $335,864, contract number 15-0141, correction order 6.
Councilor Erickson, and we'll probably address both of these together as these two kind of
That would be,
dovetail together.
yes, that would be sufficient. Director Cotter, if you can please come forward. I'd like to start with item 4, please, with the $132,000 and some change miscellaneous revisions to the city administration building. I'd just like to have just a general idea of what these items are as far as those changes and maybe why.
Certainly. Thank you for having us. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. The first change order that is $132,532. There's about 28 different line items in that change order that we've been working with the contractor to incorporate into the project. They've been owner requested changes. You know, I can frame up a couple of them and we can certainly provide you the full change order. You know, the first one, additional street repair, curb and repair added and removals, 21,000. Another significant portion of this one is there was a number of before, you know, a number of houses along Minnesota Avenue were removed years ago. A lot of driveway cuts, substandard sidewalk, and then a lot of that water, when it came down Minnesota, kept cutting in and eroding the site. And so we did about $27,000 worth of sidewalk, ADA approach, things of that nature. There's also a number of even small items. There was an acoustic attenuation right when you came in the building. There was one small conference room that had a sheetrock ceiling, didn't have any acoustic attenuation, so we spent some, you know, just a small amount of money to attenuate that so, you know, people could function in those rooms. So there's a whole list of ads, and there is one deduction. We had some, at one time we had, you know, you can put these form liners to make things look like boards up against concrete. We removed that. That had a $21,000 savings. And so really over a course of from summer to current, there's 28 different, what we call PCOs that ultimately, they're potential change orders that roll into one change order. That equates to the $132,532.
Thank you, that makes sense. I just want to have a little more information. Mr. Mayor, do you want to turn it to the rest of the council, or do you want to?
Yeah, if there's discussion on that specific piece, Mark, council, any questions?
Otherwise, I'll go to the next item then. Item number 3, Director Cotter, just understand it's a newer building and want to just have a little dialogue and a little information from you in regards to this air-cooled chiller system that will be added.
All right. Yeah, this one's certainly a larger change order. This change order is for, this change order 6. It's for $335,864. When the design was done for the building, geothermal cooling system was presented to us. That's what we moved forward with. And ultimately, if you're aware of what a geothermal system is, this particular design, you drill a well, you take water out that's at a very consistent low temp, run it through a mechanical system, and then you reject the heated water, and it becomes a very constant process and very efficient process. What's happened is that the water quality of that water has got a higher mineral content that has been plugging up the mechanical system, and then ultimately doesn't allow us to reject water down the wells. And so after, you know, spending a lot of time trying to get the system working, it's just not functional. And so we are, as a project team, knew we had to move forward with a different system, a very typical system that you'd see in most buildings, an air-chilled system. And so what this provides is a change order for the contractor to ultimately go out and purchase that air-chilled system along with the installation to get it functional so we can have an air conditioning system online for summer. We did operate the building throughout the course of the summer, had to do an interim solution where we, instead of rejecting the water down the well, we rejected it down the wastewater system for the short cooling system, but we don't want to do that long term. So that was our interim fix. An air chill system ideally would be online by about mid-April and ultimately provide a good cooling solution for the building going forward.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for the
discussion on this. Councilor Sale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier today, you talked about the success of the construction manager at risk, and I believe this was one of the projects that would fall under that. Could you explain to an old farm boy like me a little bit how the construction manager at risk worked to our benefit in this situation?
Yeah, well, on a system like this where you have a design, very, specific design. The construction manager at risk then takes that design and ultimately goes out and prices the system, gets the wells drilled. Early on, what we would see from a benefit is that you could see what the system's going to cost up front, and then also get some feedback on long-term maintenance or operational costs, and compare it to other systems. And so I would say that's probably a key benefit, is that you can actually get the designer and the constructor together early in the design process, so you can look at what choice you make to actually have a good long-term cooling system.
Other discussion, council, on this item? Councilor Starr?
Thank you. Director Cotter, we paid for the geothermal chilling unit, and now we're paying for the replacement of a more traditional system. I guess I'm confused how that's our expense.
Well, that's yet to be determined, but to kind of first and foremost, to make sure the building has an adequate cooling system, we've got to move forward. And we're fortunate, even with this change order, the project is still substantially under budget. The key will be, and we've worked closely with the city attorney's office, is to ensure all parties continue to work amicably together to get the new system in place before there's any objective of fault or cause on any party. That it'll be important for us to first get the system in place, and we'll work forward on the actual liability of this change.
How, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just one more. One of the ways that we sold this building to the public was that it was going to be state-of-the-art. It would have the benefits. We weren't making it LEED certified, but we were getting as close as possible without the certification process. Have you been able to look at the numbers of switching from what we were, shouldn't say promised, but what we saw happening with the geothermal system for cost versus going with the traditional, and especially when you look at that over the course of an 80-year life expectancy of this building, or however long the life expectancy, I guess, of the system wouldn't probably be that long. But
we haven't yet, Councilor. I would just say it is unfortunate, because we established this building. We wanted it to be very inefficient, or we wanted it to be very efficient, to make it very, cost effective to manage it. And we did a number of different strategies, whether it's geothermal, it has spray foam insulation, and then we evaluated things like the first 3 inch were in the base bid, then we took an add to add another inch of spray foam insulation, and did a number of those different strategies to make sure that we had a really good system. This is certainly a change. It will have a more traditional cooling system, which will certainly require more operational costs than what the geothermal system is, but haven't ran those numbers out for either 10 years or 80 years. Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Steele.
We touched on this conversation earlier today when Director Cotter gave us a little synopsis on the construction manager at risk program. And one of the things that I heard you say, Mark, was that the construction manager at risk brings in constructability expertise. I like that word. Constructability expertise, to me, means that we're getting people involved in this whole process that really know what they're doing. And we're relying on their expertise to say, we're going to dig this here, we're going to put this here, this is going to work here. I don't know how this is going to play out as far as who's going to pick up the tab for this, but I will tell you that in the past, when we've had this event center settlement issue, the citizens are concerned about how we're spending their money, and the biggest concern is what kind of a warranty are we getting behind as a city? What are we doing in this construction manager at risk situation to ensure that we're going to have our contractors stand behind their work? Because the people don't want to be picking up the bill for reworking something and reworking something, because it's the citizens' money and it's the citizens' business. It's not ours. So I'm very concerned about this moving forward, that we're not going to get compensated for this. When we're just paying off and we're having someone do it, I've seen it happen over the years. It's so often we do it, never gets paid back, and there you go. So, and we've got this waste treatment thing we heard about today, $260 million. As we move forward, I'm just hoping that we're going to really that we got a new mayor, new administration. We're going to be ensuring that we have a warranty on things. If we hired a man to come and put a sprinkler system in our backyard, and it turns out it doesn't work, people get warranties on that so that they don't have to pay for it. And I think our citizens deserve the same consideration.
Thank you. Any other discussion, council, on this? Councilor Shelberg, did you have comments?
Well, it kind of touched a little bit on what I was going to say, but I mean, obviously things can happen. It turns out the system wasn't compatible, and we have to make some decisions now and do the best we can with the circumstances at hand. And I think it's good news. We're still substantially under budget, but I guess, I don't know if we can comment on it. I guess we've all touched on it a bit, but I'm just kind of curious. Obviously, I would think that if the work was done, I don't know. So how do you word it right? I would just maybe say to the folks out there that there's a chance that there'll be reimbursement for the repercussions and the change out of the system. There's a chance. Can you ask that question and have somebody comment?
Well, you can certainly ask that question, Counselor. What I would tell you is that the city, of course, is going to pursue their remedies as allowed by contract and the law. And so their concerns there, and that's what we intend to do. You're really talking about two subjects here. You're talking about sort of the reimbursement or the contractual remedies that are available, but then also you have the mitigating factors, which the notice being provided to the council tonight is how do you mitigate as far as moving forward in the short term to ensure that the city can conduct business. Right. But in the end, also ensure that contractually you seek the remedies to which you believe you're entitled.
Right. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
Well, and it comes back to, I mean, I'm just saying, moving ahead here, contractually dealing with this waste treatment project, we need to make sure that we don't have the event center settlement happening again. And that was done secretly. The council wasn't even aware of what was going on. So it's like, who took the brunt of the blame? Nobody really knew. And it shouldn't be that complicated when you're dealing with taxpayer-funded projects. I think it comes back to the contract. It comes back to how we negotiate these things to start with. And if the construction manager at risk allows that gray area of who's responsible once it's all done and you move down the road, no accountability, no warranty, no insurance recovery, then I think we got a problem with that way of doing things. That this is what we have to be deciding here.
Thank you. Councilor Brecky.
Question for City Attorney. Are we going to be having a legal briefing on this? And do you have any concerns about our legal position if we approve this contract tonight?
Well, you're not, this is a change order. That there will be no vote on this topic tonight. Per city ordinance, specifically 36.020, this is notice to the council. And so there's not a vote, but I can tell you that we'll be pursuing our remedies as allowed by law. And, you know, this is one of in the event of litigation, or even in the event of potential litigation, this is something that can be briefed under an executive session, or from an informational point of view, depending on the circumstances, can be provided as information to the council.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Councilor Erickson?
Do we need to approve this then, since it was pulled, or it's just a notice and we had the discussion and we can move on?
It's a note, based on the fact that it exceeds the state, the bid limits, the council's entitled to notice of this. But since it's within budget and the money's been appropriated, there isn't a vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, but a point of order, do we not take, because it is an agenda item now, do we not take public input or hear from the public as part of it?
It's just a notice of a consent agenda item, so.
But when I talk to the Parliament, I'd still raise the same point of order.
Thank you. I'll ask the city attorney. Is there public input on a consent agenda pulled item?
Not to my knowledge. I guess I'd ask the parliamentarian if they have a position on that. But at this point, it's a notice item. So to my knowledge, not.
Change order though. Okay. Any other?
What was the ruling from the parliamentarian?
I would defer to the city clerk to answer the question, please.
Mayor, I would recommend, just based on the guidance that we give during public input, that all public input shall be 3 minutes, other than those items up for final adoption, then probably to err on the safe side to have public input for this.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
That one, no one will want it, but no one will want it.
Based on that, is there anyone who would like to speak on this?
Bruce Danielson. Haven't we learned any lessons from the event center, the swimming pool, all these other issues that we've been trying to deal with over the last several years? I appreciate so many things that Mark Cotter brought up. We finally, for the first time, got some admissions that there's some issues here. And I'm watching several things already tonight that we're making votes on things we really have no information on. We're sorely lacking in information. I tried to get this packet of information since Friday, and I had no idea what was going on. Nobody seemed to have any idea what was going on. Public's asking questions. I'd really like to have this body take some time and come up with some actual policies so this kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. I appreciate the administration bringing this forward so that we could actually talk about it. We could hear something finally. We don't want to get in that situation again where is it $1 million or $1 million bucks. We don't know if it was value or if it was cash. If it came out of the piggy bank, it came out of the savings account, came out of someplace, and we have no idea how to reach in that far to grab what needs to be grabbed in order to make it work. There's a real problem in this construction manager at risk process. It needs to be really discussed and worked on. There's so many things that we could be involved in as citizens, and we could probably be more on your side to get this done if it was more forthcoming and not hidden until the last minute. And they'll go, oh my gosh, it happened. That's what the 6,550 people that signed those petitions, 6,400 signatures were validated. We know these people had questions about that building. We want to have answers. We finally want to have answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Ciano, I have spoken time after time about the need for respect of contractual obligations of this body, members of this body, and other members of the city, state, and federal government to the people. That is what you get paid for. There is a contractual obligation. Now here we're talking about another contractual obligation, which is somewhat related, where apparently somebody did not put a pipe in to prevent the leaching of minerals into the flow water in a geothermal system. This seems grossly negligent and can certainly be the subject of a lawsuit by the city against such party, whoever it is. This is just the way the law works. I'm sure your attorneys in this body are aware of this. So we need to, on behalf of the public, take such action as is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this item? Councilors, do you have any other discussion on this? Councilor Brecky?
I would just like to thank Mark Cotter, and the mayor and administration for being very forthcoming on exactly what's going wrong out there. Obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out there's some legal issues, and so we have to be kind of tight-lipped about it. But it's really nice to have you get up here and explain what's happened, how you tried to fix it with an interim fix and all of that. It would have been nice if we would have had time to have a legal briefing before, but on the promise that we will after, and we'll be continuing to be updated on this as it plays out. I appreciate the way it's been handled. Again, whatever happened out there wasn't done under your under your watch, but you had to respond to it, and I think you respond to it very differently than this situation would have been responded in the past. And so I'm grateful for that, and I wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Clerk, next item, please.
Item 10, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, authorizing the mayor to enter into a master license agreement between the City of Sioux Falls and ComNet Cellular, Inc., doing business as Verizon Wireless for the installation and maintenance of poles and small cell equipment in city right-of-way, parks, and other city-owned property.
Thank you. Stacy, I'll let you speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This is second reading on the ordinance between the city and ComNet Cellular, which, aka Verizon Wireless, it pertains to providing the 5G service to the City of Sioux Falls. Tonight's reading follows first reading last week, informational meeting on December 18, and prior to and even after that, countless hours of work on behalf from many departments within the city, including, of course, the city attorney's office negotiating the contract, but Public Works, Innovation and Technology, and a lot of other departments. And while I'm loath to name names, I'm very proud of Diane Best and Jerry Jungling for being the tip of the spear on that. Also, Tori Miedema was actively involved, and Jason Reisdorfer and John Clemmy, and many others. So also throughout this process, we appreciated the council's input and information and questions as we went through, and then also, of course, the mayor as the one who needed to provide some of the decisiveness as we came across some of the challenging legal issues. He gave us a latitude to work on those, but then ultimately made a number of decisions that helped get us where we are tonight.
Thank you, Stacy. Is there anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Good evening.
Evening, Jim Holloway again. I'm here, I just found out about it today. I didn't realize you had a first reading of this last week, and I apologize. I should stay up on these things a little better, but I'm here to speak against entering into this master license agreement because of so many things about the 5G rollout that are detrimental to health. I've been doing a lot of research lately and looked at peer-reviewed articles and the experts on this, and there's no reason to roll this out now. And the bottom line, when you get right down to it, is that there has been no safety studies on the 5G. The premise here is that, oh, well, there's no harm. That should never be our standard. I don't see any harm. I'm going back to when I'm talking about wireless in the 2 through 4G. Well, we don't see any harm, but electromagnetic fields are tasteless, odorless. You can't see them, but they do affect you. And the peer-reviewed studies before 5G shows tremendous health effects on people. There are cancers, probably most famously glioma cancer that Senator McCain had, died from that. They think it's from his cell phone use. Same with Ted Kennedy. McCain had tumors on his neck before he got the brain cancer. So what I'm here tonight to say is the standard isn't that we don't see any harm. The standard should be that you have to prove there's no harmful effects from this electromagnetic field, microwave radiation that's going to be coming with the 5G. You see, the thing is 5G is added on top of what we already have, 2G through 4G. And we're already being radiated from that. So from what I understand, nationwide there's going to be a rollout of 10 million of these antenna in neighborhoods. The first thing I'd like to bring up to you And oh, by the way, I don't know, can I give you a handout? I've got a handout of information here. I have a couple extras for.
You give them to Jim right there, he'll hand them out for you.
Okay, this is for them. That's the wrong ones, just a minute. Here. Okay, sorry, I'm not the best at this. No I will point out to you that on December 3rd, Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut, along with Representative Anna Eschew from California, District 18, sent a letter to Commissioner the FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, asking them to stop and not do anything until they prove that 5G is safe. That is what the gist of the letter says. And he's actually quoting Mayor Tenhagen in this letter. So, as far as studies go, there's all kinds of information I can give you. I don't have the time tonight to get into all of it, but there are the EMF Scientists Organization. There are 247 EMF scientists from 42 nations that have signed an appeal to the UN, and they said that we recommend that in keeping with UN principles and guidelines for human rights to protect, respect, and remedy, 5G technologies must be subjected to an independent health and safety assessment before they're launched. Then there's another appeal to the UN, and I believe this might include the European Parliament or whatever. That this is of over 240 scientists and doctors from 40 different countries, essentially saying much the same thing. So the hazards are there, and I could go on, but again, if you would look at that handout that I gave you, it's for municipal leaders, and I got it from.
Jim, I have to stop you there. Thank you for your input tonight. Anyone else here to speak on this item?
Hi, Stephen Ciano. Remember Pandora's box and the fall from Eden? Once the genie's out of the bottle, there's no putting it back. This is a threat. I recognize what the person before me was presenting as fact. The radiation given off from the electromagnetic radiation fields are inimical to human health, animal health, and affect plants as well. This is a scientific fact. Do we want to base our decisions here in this body on scientific fact, or do we want to be beholden to the big business powers that so often fog our reason? As Paul Simon said in the 60s, when I was growing up, the people bowed and prayed to that neon god they made. Yes, we worship. What one of my favorite philosophers said, you can't serve two masters. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this item tonight? Council members, questions for Stacy, discussion. Councilor Staley.
Stacy, have there been any municipalities that have denied or rejected bringing this in or put us any resistance?
Are you referring to on the basis of health factors?
I'm just saying that they would say no to 5G.
Well, I haven't done an exhaustive search of the cities that have or have not, but bear in mind, and we touched on this in the informational briefing, the FCC regulates this because this is a telecom. And so as a result, 5G is coming and Verizon is coming regardless into our rights of way. So this contract is intended to help control that and to ensure that the arrangements that are in place in Sioux Falls are in the best interests of the city and its residents. And so absent this contract, telecommunications companies can come install their 5G within those areas, irrespective of this contract.
So so what you're saying is that nationally, there have been no municipalities that have voted against this and kept it. I mean, you're saying that that would be an impossibility?
I'm actually not saying that.
Because if they are able to just come in no matter what.
I'm going to ask Diane, did you have, oh, you were on your way up. Did you have comments on that? Okay, you can come forward, please. You look like I caught you off guard, so welcome.
I did do some research on that very subject. Under federal law, municipalities cannot prohibit or undertake conduct that has the effect of prohibiting the telecommunications in general, but certainly small cell, the rollout of small cell technology. And so the FCC is bound by it, cities are bound by it. The federal law provides that if cities do prohibit small cell technology, that they can be taken to court and required to either expedite their review if they've created a moratorium to take longer to decide. They would be can be required by federal courts to expedite their review or to take other actions that do not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the small cell or the cell technology. And in fact, there are court cases where cities did take an unduly restrictive view of what should be allowed in communities, and some communities did have attempted to bar various types of cell installations, and those communities then were taken to task in federal court. And there are federal court cases in several states where that has happened. It has not happened in South Dakota.
Councilor Steeling.
Okay, and these are concerns I've heard from citizens. Okay, so I just wanted to have it documented once again as to what's been told to us as council members. I mean, the second thing is this cost that the rental cost, and where we're told it can't be prohibitive, we're not supposed to be making a profit. So what would happen, and right now it's $175 a pole, is that correct? I think it's $175.
It's a $500 fee for reviewing the application when they come in to make sure that they meet zoning criteria and other site review, and then a $175 rental per year per pole.
So just for the public's knowledge, if we were to say, what would happen if we say, well, we're going to make it $300 a pole? I mean, because that's it's kind of a gray area when you say, well, you're not supposed to be making a profit. So what keeps us from charging a little more? Or
I can address part of that while Diane looks at some things. One of the things,
$250 a pole.
one of the things that was negotiated into the contract, because you're dealing with new technology and you're dealing with some things that there's just a lack of familiarity because this is rolling out across the country. But one of the things that we negotiated into the contract was the option to do a rate study. In the event that the city at some point feels like that number's not accurate, that the city, is unduly burdened financially as a result of these rates and they're too low, we have the ability to conduct that rate study to come back and say, hey, it turns out that number's not exactly accurate. And that was not a foregone conclusion. That was a duly negotiated term within the contract.
Which, by the way, for the public's knowledge, the council did not have anything to do with negotiating any of the terms in the contract. Attorney Koistra, I'm right in that, right?
What's that?
Okay, I just want the public to understand that we as a body did not have anything to do with that contract. We didn't negotiate the contract.
You were not involved in the negotiation.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, just so they understand, as far as whatever that cost might have been, and that $175 per pole will be in effect for how long before that can be revisited?
There's no timing criteria on the rate study. If the city determines that it's in its best interest to conduct the rate study, it can do the rate study.
So that could be, they could have that rate for the next 10 years.
Yes, I mean, it's a 10-year contract with a 1-year or 1 5-year extension option.
And then the other thing that came up when, and Diane, I don't know if you have the answers to this, but I was asking actually the Verizon people were here for our informational a few weeks ago. And I said, what's going to be the location? How close together will these things be? Are there going to be 2 in a block? Are they going to be a mile apart, 3 blocks apart? And the answer given to me was less than satisfying. They did not know. And I've since have heard that there's, just for the public's knowledge, that there's, and you can verify this, there will be a higher percentage of those little boxes put, and they're lower down, which is a little concerning, but there'll be a higher percentage of these things placed in higher congregate areas than in like just a regular rural area or neighborhood. Am I right? Like by the malls, places where there's more activity hospitals are going to have more of these.
What I heard Verizon say at the informational on December 18 was that they are more interested in placing small cell technology in more dense areas, which would include, for example, shopping malls and those sorts of things, rather than residential areas. If you would like me to talk about what Sioux Falls' current zoning requirement is, I certainly can do that.
Please.
Our zoning requirement provides that when a new pole is constructed for a cell use, and now I'm talking about a small cell tower, and I think you all probably know this, but a small cell tower can, by FCC requirement and federal law, be no taller than 50 feet. We expect these to be shorter than 50 feet by quite a bit. They're going to be on light poles. But when a new pole is constructed, our zoning requires a small cell facility that there be a 600-foot radius between that small cell tower and the next small cell tower. So it would be the 600 feet radius for each tower. And then there would be a side yard property line restriction too that would require that pole to be basically to the side of property rather than directly in front of property. It's my understanding that's the purpose of it. It's within 5 feet of the side property line is the zoning requirement.
Thank you, Diane. Councilor Sale.
Just one question. Based on the information that we've been given and the restrictions that the council has to approve a contract, negotiate a contract, if a citizen had a complaint about wireless technology, where would be the appropriate place to take your complaint?
Well, there are various places to take those complaints. If the complaint concerns a cell tower not meeting, or cell light pole, not meeting the standards that are required by the contract that you're looking at today, or that are required by the city zoning standards, that complaint would properly be lodged with the city and probably the zoning and planning department within the city if they believe that this site review was erroneous. If the complaint concerns radio frequency transmissions, the complaint would properly be lodged with the Federal Communications Commission, and that's because the federal law provides that the FCC has sole authority over determining, overruling on the environmental effects, which would include human health effects, of radio frequency transmissions by cell companies. So it really does depend on what the issue is. If the complaint was about rates and whether the city, a person felt that the city was unfairly subsidizing these entities, for example, which was brought up, is is the city somehow bearing some of this cost, then that complaint could be lodged with the city. And the city has, as city attorney noted, the city has full authority to go back in and do a rate study and determine whether those rental rates are adequate. And we would have to look at what is it costing the city as the landlord of the companies putting equipment on these poles. What is it costing us to provide this as the landlord? Are they coming in and tearing up our asphalt, tearing up our turf? Is that costing us money? And if it is, then we ought to be compensated fully. We're the landlord. But those are the kinds of things you would look at in a rate study.
Thanks, Diane. Councilor Neitzer.
Diane, you touched on it a little bit, but what would have went into the decision of coming up with the $175 figure that gets you to where you say that that's the fair market value?
Well, really, there are a couple of factors. One is that during the course of these discussions, the Federal Communication Commission issued a ruling, as you know, in late September, and the ruling provides that that in general, a combined rate of, I forget the exact numbers as I stand up here tonight, but a combined rate of, say, $600 a pole is for the application and for a year's rental would be something that would be presumed to be valid that a city could charge. But if you are asking for exorbitant fees, you're effectively precluding telecommunications in that city. So if we had said, well, gee, you know, we should have $4,000 per pole and we didn't have any cost basis for it, then you start looking like you're running afoul of the federal law that says you can't prohibit telecommunications. And in fact, that FCC ruling, 90-some pages, provided examples at length of those high costs and so forth. So that ruling came out, so that gave a strong indicator to municipalities: get in line, provide for cost-based, for reasonable rates. If you can demonstrate you've got reasonable rates, go for it. But otherwise, we're going to presume that your rates are going to be in that lower range. So that's what the FCC ruling said. And then the 175, you have to start somewhere as a negotiated rate. And we don't have this equipment on city-owned light poles at the present time. And once we do, we'll be able to develop some information on what it does cost the city, and we will have the ability to go back and do the rate study then.
Okay, and I will say, also you touched on the study, and having also read the study, as it pointed out, just so people know, one of the reasons why it said that municipalities and we're not supposed to be gouging is because if you just imagine big cities, they could monopolize and they could gouge, let's say Verizon, and that's going to slow down deployment to other cities. If we gouged, we'll slow down deployment, or it's just going to be passed on to the consumer one way or the other. So you just imagine if every municipality did it. New York City and a couple big cities would end up with 5G because they were charging $1 million a pole, and it wouldn't go anywhere else in the nation. So that's their public interest reasoning. I do want to say that obviously reading it, it's coming one way or the other, but I want to say for my sake, I'm not going to use that as an excuse for voting for this. I'm voting for this because it is a good contract. And looking at the CDC, the WHO, and the American Cancer Society all say that there's no credible evidence or studies that show that there's any ill health effects from this, so I'm not going to be afraid of it, and I'm going to vote for it because I think it's a good policy, not because I'm going to say that I have a gun to my head. I don't.
Councilor Staley and then Councilor Erickson.
Well, and it's not a gun to our head, but I don't know that we have any choice not to vote for it. I do want to request a rate study. I'm going to put my order in now on that moving forward. I'd like us to look at that. And to me, it would make sense that we don't have a national standard, that they're saying this is, whether it's New York or Eureka, South Dakota, this is what you're going to pay per light pole. Per unit. If that's how it is, that's how it is. Verizon is going to make money on this, right, Diane? They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart.
Verizon is a for-profit corporation.
Yes, so that we're not supposed to hinder their ability to make a profit, but you brought something up, Diane, that I hadn't thought about, is concrete being crushed up, yards being destroyed in the boulevard, grass being uprooted. Well, if they're going to be digging holes and replacing these light poles, and the public needs to know, from what I heard, that Verizon is going to be giving us new light poles, right? That they're putting these on new, they're going to be replacing these, the ones that they're putting their little cell mechanisms they're going to replace the light poles.
In general, yes. They've indicated that what they would do is determine where they want to put the equipment and then evaluate whether our existing poles have the strength to support their equipment and our existing light equipment. And if they do not, they would install new poles. And by and large, it would.
I thought, I was
I'm reliably informed that it would be new poles.
That's what I thought I heard. But anyway, just making sure, I mean, we certainly don't want to cause any damage to a residence boulevard area. I mean, it's the city's boulevard, but you're going to hear from citizens if they start ripping up concrete.
Yes, if I may, on that subject, there are also provisions within the contract that would provide that harm caused by Verizon would be at the cost of Verizon when it comes to other property and the city's property as well. But if there are incidental wear and tear items, that we as the landlord are entitled to certainly increase those rates if we can document that.
Thanks, Diane. Councilor Erickson.
Just want to add a perspective to the South Dakota question that came up, that what are other cities looking for? I will tell you, as your board member for the Municipal League, they are looking at us and they are asking for our ordinance and our contract as an example to mimic what we're doing. And so we're really the leader of the state in this item, and that Yvonne at the Municipal League is waiting for our stuff, and essentially you'll see other municipalities doing the same thing that we are doing. Why reinvent the wheel if what we have works? And so that's part of the conversation that just want to make sure that you're aware of. With that said, I'm going to make a motion to approve this item.
Second, Nitzert.
All right, we have a motion by Councilor Erickson to approve this item, seconded by Nitzert. Discussion amongst the council. Councilor Brackey.
Yeah, I'd like to just add some background. I attended Congressman Thune's field study on this issue. And I think actually we're kind of putting a little bit of a negative spin on it tonight, and I'd like to throw down a positive one. Our mayor was held up at that meeting as being a very forward thinker in leading out with Sioux Falls to implement 5G. Now, background is that the Telecommunications Act has been around for a long time. It was in the 90s, and the federal government clearly preempted the cities at that time from doing very much other than protecting the kinds of things that Diane has gone into detail about. And so the acts that have been passed since then have maintained that limitation. So our involvement is limited, but how you need to think of this is there's certain areas, and we're going to have another one on the agenda tonight, where the federal government has preempted it because they have the big picture issue in mind of what's good for this country. And right now this country is in a race with China. And back when 4G was adopted, and this is all I learned at the field meeting with Congressman Thune, back when 4G was adopted, our country adopted and rolled it out first to a great economic, 10-year economic advantage. And right now China's ahead of us. And we are trying, Congress is trying to play a fast and furious, get ahead of the game again to see if they can't lead this country out and do the same thing all over again. And our piece in South Dakota is we're leading out. Right now, this act by us, Christine's exactly right. We are rolling this thing out. Our people are working together. They're working with the Congress, and they're poised to set up this entire state as being one of the first states to roll out 5G. And what does 5G mean? The best example that I got in, you might have to pop in here because I might not remember the details just right, but they're trying to explain what it really means in a way that a normal person like me could understand it. And they said, it means everything's faster. It means more apps. It means, it's scary cool, but it means everything happens fast. And the way that they explained it, the best example that they gave was, the autopilot cars that they're working on now, the technology, of how a car can, the autopilot cars can react to the bumper, of a car in front of it. Right now it takes about 10 seconds, for a car that's 20 feet behind a car that's 20 feet ahead of it. The technology would take about 10 seconds for that car to make an adjustment. With 5G, the number is 2.5 seconds. So just wrap your arms around that. I left that meeting thinking, whoa, everything's going to take another quantum leap. And we're a piece of that. What is happening right now is this city is working hand in glove with the federal government through our congressmen, and that's what we're here tonight to do. Is move this city forward and be part of the cutting edge things that are going on in the country. So I'm going to be voting for it, and I'm nervous about the health things because, there's that concern. I can't tell you that I'm not, because I'm hoping that my federal government is really taking care of me, but they have preempted us in this issue, and even if they aren't, we can, I'll tell you what, after I listen to you tonight, though, I'm going to lay it down and listen to it on speaker. So anyway, I'm going to be voting for it with excitement. So
thank you, Counselor. Counselors, any other discussion on this? If not, I'm going to call for a vote on this motion.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg? Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. Next item, please.
Item 11, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, declaring certain real property of the city surplus and authorizing the exchange of city land with a private landowner.
Hello, Mark.
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. This is the second reading. We don't have any new information for you tonight. We recommend this simple exchange of city property with this adjacent landowner as the first step to repurpose this piece of land that's essentially in the central part of our city. Jim Wiederick is also here with representing the owner of the land, Bill Mellenbrandt, if you have any questions for Jim.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Counselors, you have questions for Mark on this?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Selberg.
Okay, motion approved by Erickson and seconded by Selberg. Discussion, Council. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on this, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. Next item.
Item 12, first reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by revising Chapter 95, Parks and Recreation, Section 95.012, Firearms, Guns, Fireworks, and certain remote control aircraft, prohibited by removing the prohibitions of remote control aircraft. Recommendation, set a date of second reading for Tuesday, January 15th, 2019.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In front of you is an ordinance to essentially repeal the local drone authority ordinance that is in place. I just want to give you a little bit of background information. This essentially happened by constituent services. I was at the chamber meeting on October 16th, standing in line, met a person who introduced me to another constituent. We began a conversation in regards to drone and how it impacts our city and our parks. Through that, we had conversations, several phone conversations, followed with a meeting with the administration on November 15th. In that meeting was the city attorney, parks director, director of innovation and technology, as well as an additional park staffer. Through those conversations, we started doing some research and found that we're really out of compliance. We are, again, preempted by the FAA in regards to the local drone authority. This conversation continued in an attorney meeting with 4 counselors, as well as talked about at an informational meeting, which later was passed unanimously on December 14th by the Park Board, and tonight is in front of you for a first reading. So what does this ordinance mean to all of you? In front of you on the overhead and in each of your packets, as well as on the side table, is a press release from July 20th, 2018. Essentially, you can all read it for yourselves, but the part I'm going to draw out to you is that cities and municipalities are not permitted to have their own rules or regulations governing the operation of aircraft. However, as indicated, they may generally determine the location of aircraft landing sites through their land use powers. So essentially, what we have the authority to do is regulate takeoff and landing anywhere on our city property. This ordinance does not address that at this time because, Jim, I'm going to have you put up another map for me. This map, there's some over there as well. This essentially gives you the map of the flying zones around our city. I've learned more about drones in the last 2.5 months that I ever imagined. The 0 area where you see that box, that is our airport. This is already a drone-free zone. You cannot fly a drone over that. Just because we are repealing this ordinance, or essentially I'm asking you to repeal this ordinance, does not mean that there's not rules and regulations. I would refer you to the FAA.gov website for any additional information. And as a drone operator, whether you are a hobbyist or a commercial drone operator, you have several rules and regulations to follow. I started researching this and seeing all of the rules that take place, and it is their utmost responsibility is safety of our community. There are contacts as well. I have all of those if there's ever complaint of who you can contact, as well as all the rules and regulations on that website. I will be happy to answer any questions. However, I know there's a handful of drone commercial pilots here tonight that are way smarter than me and more educated about this particular topic, and happy to answer any questions for you as well as address you tonight. I'd ask for your support and send this to the second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Can't on that machine, sir, but I think you on the second reading you can, but you can lay something on that overhead if there's something to show us.
Okay, well then, so you mean next week?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm Mr. Nathan Hofflander. I teach computer science at Roosevelt High School. I am the advisor to the RHS Flight Club, where we fly drones and provide services for schools and organizations that need things done. I'm also a aerial data services drone entrepreneur and business owner here in Sioux Falls. And I guess I could just save then my presentation for next week, because I actually wrote notes about all the things that happened tonight, and God bless your work. I'm tired just listening back here and not even interacting, and I deal with high schoolers all day. I don't know. This is live to serve. Yeah. The road issues lady. We could survey with drone. We could survey traffic patterns. We could survey where people are slipping. We could take a drone out there for a couple of hours and just see what happens during those busy times of the day. Our diminishing middle class. Aerial data services, middle class jobs. They're more advanced jobs, yes, but you don't necessarily need to go to college to fly a drone, or to be a mechanic to fix a drone, or to work with the data analytics that go along with all the data that you capture with the drone. I see that as a re-emerging middle class in Sioux Falls. My timeout on my phone needs to change. Yeah, but I need 5G. July 17th, there's some viewing platform. I caught some of that, but then I got tired of it, so I zoned out. we could take footage of that for planning purposes, layout, and other infrastructure. Drainage came up, drainage projects. We have a lot of drainage areas in town. Some of them get too much drainage. So how could we expand that? We could use orthomosaic maps to figure out better ways to address that. The last thing that I wrote before one suggestion, 5G. I have only experienced running out of battery power, and then it landed safely somewhere in a forest out west. But if we had 5G, we would have less broken links from our remote to our drone. So where you have incidents like in Des Moines where a child was hit in a park, it's very possible that they lost control link with their craft because maybe they were tethering their internet with their phone to their iPad and they lost connection. With 5G, that wouldn't happen. So for, I guess, public peace of mind, knowing that we have connection and knowing that we're safe and responsible pilots, it would be an advantage for us to be able to fly and have accessible areas like in our public parks.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it, man. Anyone else from the public here to speak on this item? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mike Clarenbeek. I'm an employee of Frontier Precision. We just started this company 2 years ago, formerly known as Aerial Horizons, before we changed and combined with Frontier Precision. I myself am a certified flight instructor, so my background is all aviation, and then I moved into the UAS drone area when I went to school at University of North Dakota, and they started their program up there. And if any of you follow it, you probably have seen that come across a few times. They have the UAS test site, and they're very ahead of the game as far as the UAS stuff goes. So I'm really here kind of as a legal expert. Also, I kind of offer an eye from a different perspective. We sell and we train and we service this type of equipment. So we have probably a dozen, including some people here that are customers of ours. We've done training for local news, engineering companies, all to get the FAA licensing. And then we've also helped keep their equipment working in top shape. So what I just would like to say is I think you guys are doing a good job making sure that this reads correctly. I do believe in accountability, however, that it's important to make sure that the good guys are doing the good stuff. There's a lot of great uses for drones, but I also want to make sure that the public safety or the law enforcement has the tools that they need also to enforce these set of rules. And when dealing with the FAA deals heavily with reports. I've co-presented with Steve Hoogerhide. I don't know, Christine, if you talked to the FSDO at all. So Steve Hoogerhide, he's out there with the FAST team. Also Lori Thompson, she works out at the office in Rapid City. And law enforcement is a problem for them because they do not have a huge number of people to do enforcement. So they rely heavily on local law enforcement, and all they can really do is report to the FAA what has happened, much like an airplane accident or something like that. They usually turn those things over to the FAA, the NTSB. They're not going to be taking away licensing or anything like that or issuing in fines. That's all going to be to the federal government. So with that, control of the ground. We do have the power to control on things that happen on the ground. So if we take off and land, permitting processes aren't, I would say, out of the picture. I would just make sure that they are written with the idea that that's kind of what we have jurisdiction over and not necessarily the federal airspace. And requirements for those things, I guess what I would like to see is just that whoever is using it has proper insurance and appropriate licensing. That allows local law enforcement the tools to enforce those versus having to enforce the FAA regulations. Those would come as well if they were breaking FAA rules, but then they'd have a little bit more powerful tool right off the bat. So with that, that's all I really have. So.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Yep, thank you.
Anyone else here to speak on this item this evening? Good evening.
My name is Frank Regas. I'm with Ascending Innovations here in Sioux Falls. I'm an aerial drone service provider as well. And first off, I want to thank you, Mayor and council members, for just taking a look at this and supporting, or just kind of reviewing it, and hopefully we have your support on the repeal. And one thing I'd like to really touch on is the repeal itself isn't really changing the ordinance a whole lot. Already the city does allow drones in parts weighing under 2 pounds. And the permitting process really is set forth for drones that are weighing more than 2 pounds. Unfortunately, the ordinance also restricts drones from flying in parks during events, public gatherings and whatnot. So from that perspective, I don't think we're changing a whole lot. From the commercial drone operator standpoint, we're still doing everything we can to ensure public safety, risk mitigation. We go through a lot of training. There's a lot of pre-flight stuff that we perform on a mission basis to make sure that we're doing things safely. So that's not really going to change. The chart up there that you folks are looking at, what that is a grid map that's out there for commercial drone operators that are looking for authorization within the Class D airspace to perform missions. And that's basically showing you the altitudes that they're going to be allowed to fly at. And as Christine pointed out earlier, the FAA has restricted a 2 mile by 2 mile by 2 mile, et cetera, zone around the airport protecting all the approaches. Within the city's corridor itself, you can see that those altitudes are a lot lower than as we get out into the outer corridor of town. So I think they've done that with public safety's interest in mind. And really, I just wanted today I don't have a lot prepared. I'll be here for the next reading, but I really just want to thank you folks for taking the opportunity and having the foresight to address this and hopefully help us out. And 5G, I worked for Verizon for 10 years, 30-year telecom guy. I think it's great. It's coming. It's going to be here. But from an autonomous vehicle aspect, as Nathan Hofflander spoke on briefly, it is going to give us the ability to communicate more rapidly with our vehicles. I mean, it's low latency, high speed connectivity. We can ensure that we're communicating with that drone a lot quicker than we have on an unlicensed spectrum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.
That's all I have.
Appreciate it. Anyone else here to speak on this item tonight? All right, counselors, is there a motion anyone would like to make?
I move to set the second reading for Tuesday, January 15th.
Second.
Okay, motion by Counselor Erickson, seconded by Brecky on that. Discussion, council? Counselor Staley?
Well, after this came out that we're going to be striking this from the ordinance, I put this on Facebook, and I was contacted by an employee with the FAA, and I'll run this off for next time. But he sent me a link to the FAA, and it's very informational. My concern here is that we sell drones at Walmart, I understand, and at Best Buy, and people can just go in and buy a drone, and they don't have to be trained, they don't have to be registered, there's no information at the place where they're buying this. According to the FAA's website, you cannot fly drones over groups of people. You have to be 13 years of age. If it's over a half a pound, you have to have in your own, it says even if you're flying in your own backyard, drones that weigh more than a half a pound must be registered. So we've got, the federal government has some regulations here. My concern is that there seems to be this attitude we have within our city that we can't talk about it. If people ask us about the details, we have to direct them to some FAA website, or I guess you can't really even call them. But I would like to see some energy that says we're going to have these brochures at Best Buy, at Walmart, available. And maybe we're going to say the federal government has to do that. But people need to be instructed as to what the rules are, or else you can just buy a drone and just fly it wherever you want to. I thought that we couldn't fly them over certain areas, and one time I saw someone flying one over by a Vera on their campus, and when I looked at them, I could see that they got in their car and quickly left. So that I think there's this kind of unspoken sense of, well, you really shouldn't be here, but maybe you are, and I'm getting a sense here with this discussion that we're opening this up to have at it for drones. So I'm concerned as we move forward here that we get some kind of a definition of what we're going to accept, what we're not going to accept, and that we educate people because we want them to be safe. And also, I also heard someone say, I don't know if we're going to take these as expert witnesses, so to speak, but that we're going to be asking our local law enforcement, to be policing this. So if we see somebody out of compliance, we call the police.
That's not true.
Well, I did hear that. Okay, that's wrong.
Counselor Erickson.
I'd like to respond to that. If you also refer to the FAA website, there is a public safety and law enforcement toolkit. This toolkit comes with several different downloadable pocket cards, everything you need to know about the public safety and law enforcement toolkit. On there, I'd also like to refer to you, if there are issues at all with each state is given a FAA's Law Enforcement Assistant Program, which is referred to as LEAP, and you have a point of contact for federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, and international law enforcement agencies. These LEAP special agents can provide you with information on drone enforcement, registration matters. There are several telephone numbers for many different areas, but every state has a LEAP, which is a law enforcement assistant program officer. Also on there, there is the public affairs contact information. Great Lakes region is where we are located. And in there, we have, this was just updated, I believe, in October of 2018. Their information is very current. Many of the things I saw was also updated as of December of 2018, which is very recent and quite impressive in my opinion. But there are two public affair contacts that you can contact as well. I did contact the local agency and did speak to someone who said people can contact the local office for government affairs. But I want to share with you that there is a law enforcement assistant program, or a LEAP advisor, if you will, that does oversee this. And so this simply boils down to we don't have the jurisdiction to regulate this, and so we are at risk for a potential lawsuit that if someone contacts Kelby or Director Kearney and says, I want to fly in Yankton Trails Park, and you say, nope, you can't do it, we can be sued for restricting their rights for doing that. And for me, it makes me uncomfortable knowing that we're putting those resources on the line for that. We need to refer back to the FAA for their regulations with this. They have told us, and believe me, it makes me uncomfortable because I don't want Big Brother telling us what to do. I think government works best at the local level. However, FAA has come in again and said, we hold the jurisdiction over this.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond.
Counselor Erickson, Counselor Staley.
That what I think there's some simple facts that I just read off of their website that I would like to have that written down somewhere. We can certainly instruct our citizens. We're about safety for everybody. I don't care if the FAA says that we can let people shoot guns through our windows. I mean, we have a right at some point to, well, and the thing is, where can you fly a drone now? The drones can go anywhere, I guess, unless you get a hold of the FAA. But nonetheless, I think saying you have to be 13, just so you know, we in our community, that you have to be 13 to operate a drone, that must be registered, you must have insurance. There's no reason why we can't be instructing people, even if it's an FAA thing. That's my take on this, and I will be doing that personally as well, just passing on information to help people be informed so they have the facts when they're using something like a drone or a firearm.
Any other discussion on this, council? I would call for Councilor Brekke.
If I could, I just have one question for Christine, who's done the research on this. You know, is there any plan to kind of look at this to see what kind of things we might be able to do? It looks again real similar to what we're dealing with telecommunications. Is federal government policy, and so it's limited, but usually there are some things that we can do. Did any of those really come up?
They did not. And I certainly have my opinion of what I would like to see. And as Frank and I discussed this, we were kind of batting around a few ideas of some possibilities. And then when we sat down and actually looked at the information and the memo that came out, we went, oh my gosh, we have very little authority to regulate this. And so what we wanted to do wasn't on the table. And so this really was something that the Parks Department was already looking at when I brought it forward to them, and we sat down, and it was really done in a collaborative effort. We essentially can regulate takeoff and landing spots. So for example, I'll use Yankton Trails Park again. Say you want to take off from the gas station across the street. FAA does require you to have eyes on your drone at all times. I would never feel comfortable doing that as a hobbyist. These guys are really good at their trade, and they could do that within a couple of miles and viewing that, and they could take off from essentially the gas station across the street, go over to the Yankton Trails Park. Does that make sense? I don't really know if it does. In a perfect world, I would love to see some sort of accountability with a permitting process of knowing what's going on when someone is going to fly. Essentially, you cannot fly over people, but you can request a waiver. According to the FAA, you can request a waiver to fly special events, and I don't know what that entails. I don't know how easy it is or how hard it is, but it is an option that people can request a waiver. But again, for me personally, I would love to see a permit process of, hey, here are the people that have insurance, they've taken the test, they've provided their certificate that they passed the test through that. It's a quite lengthy process. We have a city drone, Murph has taken the test and he has flown our drone, and I believe there's a couple other people that have also taken that test and have the capabilities to fly it and use it for the city purposes. But again, and I would love to see some sort of permitting process and saying, here's who can do it, whether that resides in the Parks Department or in innovation and technology. But right now, that isn't a part of the conversation because we can only regulate takeoff and landing, which is such a limited amount that until that changes, I don't know that we have the authority to do that. They do have a lot of educational components available for municipalities, states, and counties. One of the things I saw today was a marketing kit as far as drone-free zones. I would love to see a drone-free zone over the junior football fields. This is a drone-free zone. You cannot fly that close to the airport. But I'd love to see one of those signs. It's much like a speeding sign, if you will, that would cost next to nothing for our Parks Department, our Public Works Department to print a few of those and maybe put those up in those drone-free zones, if that makes sense. That already exists today, and those aren't in place. And so you can't fly in that park at all the way it is. But like I said, in a perfect world, I'd love to see a permitting process, but we're just not allowed to do that until we work with our federal delegation.
Thank you.
I'm going to call for a vote on this item, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Sailberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
All right, that passes 8-0. Counselors, any new business this evening?
Move to adjourn.
Second, Kylie.
Move to adjourn. Erickson, seconded by Kylie. All those in favor say yes. All those opposed, no. Meeting is carried. The motion is carried. The meeting is adjourned. Good night.